Very good morning, my dear students. Today we are going to see about the economics chapter 9, the development experience in India. So far we have completed 8 lessons. So in the last class we have discussed about before and after the independence of India. So we have seen so many things in the last class about the colonial, during the British period. During the British period, how was our Indian economy? After the independence, how we developed from our economical growth. We have seen so many topics. So with that we have concluded the last class up to chapter 8. Today we are going to see the chapter 9, the development experience in India. So the last class we have discussed about before and after the independence. So after the independence, after 1947, how far our own self independence in economics experiences so far up to 2015 in various sectors in the economy, what we developed by our government or by ourselves, because we have the freedom. So with the freedom, how a government from the British, what is the growth by in every sector. So that's why we are going to study about this chapter, the development experiences in India. So in that we are going to study about reform, perform and transform. To understand the reforms introduced in the recent years. That's why we are going to study about the development experiences. So about the introduction of this lesson, at the time of independence in 1947, India was typically backward economy owing to poor technological and scientific capabilities, and industrialization was limited and lopsided. Agricultural sector exhibited features of feudal and semi-feudal instructions, resulting into low productivity. The means of transport and communication were undeveloped and underdeveloped. The educational and health facilities were grossly inadequate, and social security measures were virtually non-existent. In brief, the country suffered from the twin problems of rampant poverty and unemployment. So both resulting, it leads to the low standard of living. So it is about the introduction about the chapter. Though we have independent from the British, still we have the rampant poverty and widespread of unemployment, both resulting in our Indian economy is a low standard of living. And the Indian economy responded to the crisis by introducing the set policies known as the structural reforms. These policies were aimed at correcting the weakness and rigidities in the various sectors of the economy, such as industry, trade and fiscal and agriculture. So it is about the introduction of this chapter. We are going to study about, I have written the blackboard, LPG. So many of the people or many of us, when we ask about the LPG, we say about the gas. Liquidum, petroleum, gas Usually we used to say what is the expansion of LPG. But here in the economics, in our chapter, in the 9th lesson, development experience in India, in the economics, LPG means, L means liberalization, P means privatization, and G means globalization. Please understand, not LPG gas, not liquid petroleum gas, but in our economy, in our book, LPG means liberalization, privatization and globalization. The triple pillars of new economic policy of liberalization and privatization and globalization. What's a liberalization? Liberalization refers to the removal of relaxation of government restriction in all stages in industry and delicensing, decontrol and deregulation, subsidies or incentives and greater role for the financial institutions or the various facets of liberalization. So liberalization means freedom. There should not be more restrictions. The government on people will be very less. What will be very less? Interference. The interference of government on people is less. Control is less. For example, to do anything, to do any business in our country, first we need license. Definitely we need license, but there should be an freedom, the freedom of choice to do any business. That's called liberalization. Then only we can develop, we can make our own employment. We need not to depend on if any people will give the employment opportunities. What we have the talent, what we have studied, what we educated, what we performance well in a particular sector, from that we can start any business. That's called liberalization. What's our privatization? Privatization means transfer of ownership and the management of enterprises from public sector to private sector, denationalization, disinvestment and opening exclusive public sector enterprises to the private sector or the gateways to the privatizations. So it means the government should give the freedom for the private people. The government should give some economical sectors to the private. The right to have the private property by the privatization. So I hope you understand. Liberalization means freedom to the people, for the producer, for the consumer, for all. Privatization means the ownership of the government from the particular sector and given to the private sector. That's this is investments and opening exclusive private public sector enterprises to the private sector is called privatization. And the last one, the globalization. Liberalization, privatization, globalization. The globalization means the integration of a domestic, the Indian economy with the rest of the world, the import and export, or the liberalization through reduction of tariff and non-tariff barriers, opening the doors to the foreign direct investment. So there is an FDI. It means the globalizations. The globalization means our import, our export, the relationship between the economic trade between the countries. So the foreign direct investment. So the foreign direct investment and FPI. FDI means foreign direct investment. FPI means foreign portfolio investment are some of the measures towards globalization. So I hope understand, you are all understand about the LPG. Liberalization means freedom of choice, privatization means the ownership of the government and the power and securities of the ownership is given to the private sector, and the globalization means the relationship, the trade between the domestic and with the rest of the world, or the relationship with many more countries in our import, liberalization through reduction of tariff and non-tariff barriers, and foreign direct investment, and FPI, foreign portfolio investment. So this is called globalization. Only we have the triple of pillar of the new economics, the liberalization and privatization, globalization. Then only we can develop in all the sectors. Definitely in the economy, in any countries, there should be a liberalization, there should be a privatization, there should be a globalization. So dear students, we hope you all understand about the liberalization and the privatization and the globalizations of the experience. That's why the reforms, the performs and transforms. In these lessons we are going to study that. And next one, the arguments in favor of LPG. What are the arguments in the favor of liberalization and privatization and globalization? Liberalization was necessitated because various licensing policies were said to be deterring the growth of economy. Deterring the growth of economy is called liberalization. Privatization in the favor of LPG, privatization was necessitated because of the belief that private sector was not given enough opportunities to earn more money. Even though in Indian economy there is a privatization, but most of the income of the country only by the public sector. So and it is not enough opportunities to earn more money for our private sector. But the private sector is a favor we need for the development of the economy. And globalization also was necessitated because today a developed country, understand? Today a developed country can grow without the help of underdeveloped countries. முன்னேறிய நாடுகள் டெவலப் ஆகிட்டே இருக்குது அப்படின்னா அது யாருடைய துணையால அப்படின்னா undeveloped countries or from the underdeveloped countries the developed countries are developing by the name of underdeveloped countries and undeveloped countries. Natural and human resources of the developing countries, natural and human resources of developing countries are exploited by the developed countries, and the developing countries are used as a market for finished goods of developed countries. All the works can be done by underdeveloped countries or developing countries, but who will get the name? At the what the book says that the finishing goods of all the products, it will go for the developed countries, for the finished goods of the developed countries. So thus surplus capital of developed countries are invested in the backward economies. Absolute and outdated the technologies of the developed countries can be easily sold to the poor. Underdeveloped countries, ultimately the rich countries can grow further at the cost of developing countries. At the cost of developing countries, the developed countries are growing. So, it is about the arguments in the favor of liberalization and privatization and globalization. Next, now we have discussed about the arguments in the favor of LPG. Now we are going to study about the arguments against the LPG. What will happen against liberalization, privatization, globalization? What is against LPG? Liberalization measures, when effectively enforced, the favor and unrestricted entry of foreign companies in the domestic economy. Such an entry prevents the growth of local manufacturers. It is one of the against of the LPG. Privatization measures a favor of continuance of the monopoly power. You know that already we have discussed about the monopoly power in the privatization. If we give all the sectors or if we have full freedom to the private, so the monopoly power will rise in the economy. So it means only the powerful people can sustain in business markets. Social justice cannot be easily established and maintained. As a result, there is an disparities tend to be done among the people and among the regions. So there is an favor, there is an unfavor against about the liberal privatization and globalization. We are discussing about the arguments against the LPG. Meaning I have the against about the liberal, against on private. Now we are going to against on globalization. Globalization measures tend to integrate all economics of the world and bringing them all under one umbrella. They paved the way for redistribution of economic power at the world level. Only the already well-developed countries are favored in this process, and the welfare of the less developed countries will be neglected. So what they say that under the globalization, developed countries only they will go on developing in favor of in all the sectors, but less developed countries will be neglected in the globalization. There should be an redistribution of economic power will rise in the underdeveloped countries or developing countries. The economic crises of developed countries are easily spread to the developing countries via trade. So it is about the arguments and the following major changes in our country. In 1991, foreign exchange reserves started rising. There was a rapid industrialization. What does mean by rapid industrialization? The rapid industrialization means every year by year the industrial growth is developing by step like a chain. Not 1 year or some month developing and less developing or underdeveloped, not like that. The rapidly the industrialization means it's like a chain going on increasing the industrialization. And third one, the pattern of consumption and started improving or deteriorating. Infrastructure facilities such as express, highway metro rails, flyovers and airports started expanding, but the local people were thrown away. But the local people were thrown away. So what that the against about the globalization, they say that only the rich people, one who invested more, only the developing countries or developed countries, they will go on developing, and it will neglect the other rest of the people, they say that. So it is about the arguments against globalization, and moreover the process of development has generated serious social, economic, political, democratic and ecological issues and challenges. Development brings benefit, but which sections gets this benefit depends upon socio-economic structure of the society. And government policies alone cannot be blamed, as a new institutional economics suggests the value, beliefs and norms etc. of the individuals also the matter. So my dears, it is about the arguments against LPG, and before the topic we have discussed about the arguments favor of LPG. So what are the merits and demerits of liberalization, privatization and globalization we have studied. Next topic, disinvestment. The disinvestments means selling of government securities of public sector undertakings, PSUS, public sector undertakings. This is a disinvestment. So the disinvestments means selling of the government securities of public sector undertaking, PSUS, to the other PSUS. What other PSUS? Or to the private sector or banks. This process has not been fully implemented in our economy. So that is the meaning of disinvestment. The next topic, relative the position of an Indian economy. The discussion of suitable for a particular period, only there may be a changes afterwards. So in your book, page number 192, there is a GDP growth forecast, India and China. India with China, the GDP growth forecast is given in the table. There is a bar diagram in the years, and you see that. According to International Monetary Fund, IMF, International Monetary Fund, World Economic Outlook, October 2016, about the GDP. Already I have told you about the GDP. GDP means gross domestic product. So according to this, nominal of Indian in 2016 at current prices was in $2,251 billion. India contributed 2.99% of total world's GDP. In exchange rate basis, India shared 17.5% of the total world population and 2.4% of the world surface area. India was now 7th largest economy of the world in 2016. So India was 3rd position. Please understand, India was the 3rd position after the China and Japan among the Asian countries. India shared 8.50% of total Asia's gross domestic product nominal in 2016. So this is the relative positions of Indian economy with China. So I hope that you can understand up to the relative position of the Indian economy. So we have studied about the introduction of this class, before independence, after independence in the last class. In this class, after the independence, what are the development experience in India in overall the sectors. We have seen only some topics. In the next class we will continue other topics. I hope that once or when a teacher is taking the Zoom classes, YouTube classes, one sir asked me, what is the meaning of LPG? The sir said that liquid petroleum gas. My dear friend, the sir said is correct. Liquid petroleum gas. Whenever we asked what is the explanation of LPG, liquid petroleum gas, but in our economics, especially in this chapter, the LPG means liberalization, privatization and globalization. Only if these three consist in our country, then only we can develop. That's why the topic of your book is development experience in India through this liberalization and privatization and globalization. With that, the reform and perform and transform. So with that I will conclude. Then we will continue the same lesson, the chapter in the next class. Until then I will get the answer from you. Study well. God bless you. Thank you.